And it's recording. Yay. And that's how you make $1 million in the music industry.
Hit record. Well, welcome everybody. I am so excited. No disrespect to any of my past guests or future guests, but this is the one. You can see I'm blushing. Look how red I am. I am so excited to have Wendy Day on here.
Pressure.
If you don't, I'm not going to do an introduction. If you don't know who she is, shame on you. But I know everybody on this call knows who she is. We've been talking about it ever since we booked it. We're so excited. And so the format we're going to use, Wendy, is, if you don't mind, and I hope you got the time, we usually do about 20 or 30 minutes of me kind of probing around a little bit with some questions, and then we open it up and see if anybody in the audience has some questions for you.
Awesome. And if they don't, I'll just freestyle some answers anyway.
There you go. You got to be able to freestyle in this world, right? So, you know, this is what's so difficult for me, right? This is supposed to be really about the music business. This is supposed to be about marketing, music, and all of that stuff. And I know that's what these guys want to hear about, and ladies. But I have so many other questions for you, because I feel like in a lot of ways we're cut from the same cloth. You and I are probably a little bit older than some of these people in the room. They get mad at me all the time because I refer to them as kids. But a lot of them are young enough to be my son, daughter. It's no disrespect. It's not demeaning. So I've got to ask a couple of those questions that may not have necessarily to do with marketing or the music business that they want to hear, but just stuff that's I'm dying to know.
We'll just make sure we answer it all so that they won't miss out and you won't miss out. That's not a problem.
I appreciate that, because I don't know if I'll ever get this chance again, right? This is a real blessing. So let me let somebody in here. So where would I start? So I want to give you just a brief background of myself, because I think one of the things I'm so passionate about what you do at the nonprofit at Rap Coalition is, and they just keep coming. So I started off doing social work overseas as a missionary, and I was a youth pastor, and I planted 2 orphanages in Brazil. And I returned to the States. I imported a wife. I brought my wife back from Brazil. So I'm married to a Brazilian, and not a mail order bride, guys. I can see some of you thinking that and laughing, but she is too pretty for me, but it wasn't mail order.
All right, bro.
Scooped her off her feet.
I'm in there, bro. Gringo, what's going on, man?
What's going on, Nick?
I'm just in here grinding.
So when I got back and I started working in marketing, and I was mainly working with hair salons, restaurants, real estate agents, doing marketing and stuff. And one of the kids that was actually in my orphanage now had become a young man in his 20s. We connected on Facebook. He was in hip hop. He sends me a message. He says, man, I know you're a marketing guru. Can you help me? You think with some of this marketing stuff? So I said, let me take a look at what you're doing, and I'll give you some ideas. So I started looking at it, and I was like, man, he's really good, because I'm a hip hop head. I mean, that's the only music for me my whole life. So I was like, wow, he really is kind of good. So I thought, I'm going to help him out, because I cared about this kid. I got a relationship with him. I started digging into it a little bit and looking at what other independent artists were doing. And I've got my MBA, so I know business, I know marketing. I'm older. I've got a lot of experience out in the professional world. And what I realized after I started going down this rabbit hole was that this Spotify and TuneCore and DistroKid and these distribution opportunities have created something that never existed before. We've really cut out this middleman being able to do that. And so all these guys are looking at Chance, and they're looking at Russ, and they're looking at these other people, and they're saying, you know, I can do it as an indie now. And I totally agree with that. But
if you've got the money, it's still just as expensive as it ever was.
Exactly. So the hole I saw was that it's still business. You got to be able, you can do it without the label, but you got to be able to do what the label did for you. You got to be able to market. You got to be able to know contracts. You got to be able to know branding, all these different things. And so really the business piece was missing for a lot of these guys. They were just creating music, uploading it to Spotify, and saying, why isn't anything happening?
Right.
And and after playing with that for about 6 months, in one of my year-end reflections, I kind of realized, I was like, man, I love mentoring. I love being a father. That's why I think I was put on this earth. I love serving. I love hip hop, and I love marketing. And I'm like, if I can marry these three, like, I'm in heaven. This is my passion project.
You can marry those three.
And so that's what I did. I started forming this community and trying to do that as a way to serve these artists. And so because of what you do, and I've been following you all through that time and listening to everything you say and paying attention. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it. I think what you do is your nonprofit and your for-profit is very.
Yeah, they're both remarkably similar, actually.
Exactly. That's what I was feeling. And I was hoping you would agree with that. So talk just a little bit about your nonprofit and what you guys do there.
Absolutely. I started Rap Coalition. Well, let me take a step back. I came into rap music as a fan, and I started listening to rap in 1980. I don't think anybody here was born yet, but I came to this as a fan of the music first. And when I started Rap Coalition in 1992, I started it as a not-for-profit as my way of giving back to the artists that brought me so much happiness from their music. I had heard, and there was no internet back then, so it was all like reading magazines. That's kind of how we kept abreast of the music industry. And I had heard that some of my favorite artists had gotten jerked by their labels or the production companies, which were in between them and the labels back then. And I started Rap Coalition as a way to get them out of fucked up deals. Do you guys mind if I swear?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, good, because I swear like a sailor. It was my way of giving back. And I realized very early on from studying people that had come before me in other areas of life that if I didn't get really cocky and arrogant with it and start taking the labels to task publicly, they would let me breathe and they would let me live. And if I were able to breathe and live, I could help a larger amount of people than if they shut me down pretty quickly. So that's the tack that I took. And then round about 94 or 95, I met an artist named Master P and was able to help his team negotiate a distribution deal for him at Priority Records. And that was my first deal that I did. And it was a really nice first deal to have. I was able to go on from there and do Twista's deal. I helped do Eminem's deal, the Cash Money deal, David Banner's deal, Fiend's deal. I was able to help artists make money with their music, and that really meant a lot to me. So on the not-for-profit side of what I was doing, I was pulling people out of fucked up deals, but then on the for-profit side, I was making money by negotiating these deals so that I could put the money back into the not-for-profit and help educate up-and-coming artists as well as pull people out of bad deals. And it was really kind of a great thing up until around 2005. When I was shopping a deal for Boosie and Webbie, I noticed this thing called a 360 deal. And 360 deals came into vogue because the major record labels felt like they weren't making enough money because of all of the bootlegging, like on Napster and I can't even remember all the companies, but from all the digital downloads that were occurring. So they started taking a percentage of all of the streams of income. And as somebody that already thought they were making too much money as it were, that really pissed me off. It probably wouldn't have made me as upset if they were helping artists make money in other areas that they were taking a percentage from, but they weren't. They were just putting out music. And then they were taking a piece of the touring income, even though they weren't helping to set up tours. They were taking a percentage of book income and merch income and publishing, but they weren't helping to get the book deal or the tour or set up, you know, the ancillary streams of income. So I was very against that. And I decided that I was going to stop doing deals. I was going to stop negotiating deals. And right about that time, I realized that the benefit of the internet was that artists could go direct to the consumer and they no longer had to sign to record labels. So I didn't really have to worry about 360 deals anymore. And I started teaching artists how to make money with their music from a really hands-on approach. And I started by utilizing the artists that had investors and the guys that had enough money to really make a go of this. And it not only completed my mission, which is to help build more independent rap record labels, but it also helped create more stars in the marketplace and just more artists that could self-sustain. And that has been my goal ever since. It's morphing a little bit now because it's sort of like what you had just said about, you know, wanting to help people, but they need to have the budget to properly market and promote. And this is a really expensive industry. It takes like a good anywhere from $150,000 to $500,000 to set up your own record label. And most rappers don't have that money just sitting around, you know, in their back pocket or their desk drawer. So I'm trying to figure out a way now where I can help artists find their own investors, find their own income without having an investor or a person in the middle, so that we can work directly with the artists who are then funded and help them grow their company, sort of like an accelerator or an incubator.
Yeah.
Keep them in-house for 2 or 3 years, help them grow. And then when they leave, they can leave with 100% ownership and 100% control of their own careers.
And that's how I've been trying to explain it. Is the very same model as startups. You've got to have a viable product that already has an audience, that already has a consumer base, that's already generating income. Then you can entice a venture capitalist to come along, inject money and connections into it, and voila, you have growth and explosion.
Exactly. And I think that the key is where it's a little bit different than a startup, and where I've hit a little bit of a wall in terms of finding the funding to do this, is most startups go through VCs, they go through venture capital. And what that means is that somebody's willing to put up money and take a small percentage of ownership, but their goal is to then build this successful company and flip it in, 5 to 7 years. And that's a little bit fast for the business model of the music industry, because artists are really just starting to make money in year number 2 or year number 3. So if we flip their companies to make a profit at year number 5, they haven't really been able to tap out their whole potential. So it's just a little bit different than a startup, like a tech company in that regard, but it's still the same bootstrapping and having to do everything yourself and figure out a way to do everything on a very limited budget until you get to a point where you can attract investors or make enough money to break even and just keep moving forward.
So one of the things that I'm curious about what you think, because I know you are not in this for the money.
Correct.
I think I've heard you say that without your real estate business, you probably couldn't pay the bills with definitely off the nonprofit.
Right.
So it's not.
I make more money in real estate than I do in music. And I kind of had to do that. And you kind of understand this from having a missionary background. You can't choose who to help all the time transactionally. I can't choose who to help. Not the most worthy artist has the money. So it's very difficult to make decisions in the music industry based financially. You got to kind of base it on talent and then figure out a way to plug in the monetary component. It's getting a little bit easier than it was. And what I mean by that is there are more artists today that have investors than there are artists looking for record deals. So it's gotten a little bit easier in the past couple of years, but there was a while there where I just felt like the guys that had the most talent didn't have the money, and the guys who had the money were just whack.
Yeah, sure. So we're already going into the business thing. I missed my questions, but we got to
go back, because I do want to answer your question.
I want to keep going with it. So that brings up a point I'm curious about. And again, all my guys know, and my ladies know that this is a passion project. I'm not greedy, but there's this persona that as a manager or investor, if you're asking for more than 10 or 20%, that you're a culture vulture, that you're taking advantage of artists. But you know, I've got an artist that he has no money, nothing. I've done all the business planning, all the marketing, thousands of my own dollars out of my family's bank account, introduced him to people at 1 RPM, to other artists, got him collabs, to people at Sony. I've done a lot for him. And I'm not asking for that, but it makes me begin to wonder and question, in this new independent era, if you got all these people, I'll tell you what really brought it to light for me. This Megan Thee Stallion deal that fell out. This guy did a lot for her. And
he did everything.
People in the media were chewing him up. But as somebody who's helping artists and coming out of my pocket and using my connections and my 40 years of business skills and my MBA and all that, and it's coming from a place that I genuinely want to see this kid succeed. I don't care about the money. If he could afford to pay me, I'd take a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 pay cut right now. My wife cringes when she hears that. But to be able to work for him full time, I would. What do you think about that? I mean, how should we approach this to be fair to the artist?
I have two schools of thought on this. One of my, and I'm not going to talk about you specifically, so I don't want you to internalize what I'm about to say, okay? Because sure. I'm gonna be a little harsh.
I'm thick-skinned.
One of my complaints in the music industry is that the barrier for entry is very low, and what I mean by that is anyone can start a company tomorrow and press up some business cards that says they're a record label or they're a manager, but they might not have the experience or the relationships to actually be a manager or a record label. And one of the problems that we have in the music industry is if somebody's going to manage an artist and they're going to take 20% of the income, and they're actually going to need to get that artist to the next level. That artist is going to need to make income, especially if they're getting a percentage. So if somebody's going to be a manager, they have to actually have the skill set and the relationships to properly manage an artist. And I think what happens sometimes is artists want to hire their cousin or the guy down the block that they grew up with because they want somebody on their team that they trust. So they forego experience for trust. And what happens is they hire somebody that cannot get them to the next level because they just don't have the skill set that it takes or the relationships. This is very much a relationship-driven business. And I think one of the problems that occurs is when an artist isn't successful, they don't look at all someone has done for them. They look at the fact that they're not successful and they get bitter. And it becomes, man, you're taking all my money, or man, you didn't do anything for me, even though you did everything for them. They don't see that because in their mind, they wanted to be at the level of a Drake or an Ed Sheeran or NBA Youngboy or whoever. And when I first start working with artists, the first thing I ask them is, what are your goals? Like, what level do you want to be at in this industry? Because if you're trying to be Drake or you're trying to be Ed Sheeran, that's a completely different business model than if you're just trying to put out music and make 50 grand a year and support your family, or 100 grand a year and support your family.
You said there are two schools of thought.
Yes. The second school of thought is the way I feel about Carl Crawford, where he did everything for her. He put millions of dollars into her. And then once she got to a level where she didn't need him anymore, she just wanted to cut him out. And I don't know what the deal is between 300 and Carl Crawford's label, but I have seen the paperwork for her deal. And I thought her deal with him was very, very fair. Where I'm hesitant to say that publicly, I'm sorry?
Like a 60-40 or?
Yes, 60 in her favor, 40 in his. And where I'm hesitant to say that publicly, and why I didn't weigh in on that whole beef that was going back and forth, was really because I don't know what the deal is with 300. So if they went and did a deal with 300 and they did just a typical artist deal where they signed a 300 for 15 points or 18 points, if they're splitting that 60-40, that's a terrible fucking deal.
Sure.
But if their deal with 300 is an 80-20 split, which I doubt that it is, and I'm just going to make a point here, and that's why I'm using this as an example. If she's getting 60% of 80%, that's a really good motherfucking deal. That means she's making half the money at the end of the day. But we don't know what that deal is. So we don't know if what she got was good or not good. So we can't really understand what her issue is. But I will say this, if he hadn't come along and put money into her, she probably wouldn't have blown up the way that she did, because you cannot win in today's music industry without spending a shit ton of money. And I've tried to work artists for free, and I can't. And I'm not saying that I'm the end all be it, but it's really hard to do this with the proper budget. I can't imagine doing it without a budget.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're the two schools of thought.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. So I will jump back, and then we'll just let the guys and gals get into their question. Who was the artist or the song or the album or the show that light bulb went off in your head about hip hop?
Don't push me 'cause I'm close to the edge.
Yes.
Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five in 1980 performed at University of Pennsylvania at their Fall Fling. And I was in the audience. I was there to see Psychedelic Furs, which is a new age rock group. And when Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five took the stage, I was like I was just so enamored by the sound, the passion, the energy. And their entire set just mesmerized me. And after that concert was over, I was in Philadelphia. I was in college at the time. And I went right to the record store and made friends with the DJ there that understood hip hop. And he was able to get me cassettes. You know, that's how old I am, right? He was able to get me cassettes that were recorded in the clubs in New York. And they would come into Philly every Tuesday. So I would be able to listen to the music from the weekend before, not the most current weekend, but the weekend before. Somebody would mail them into the record stores in Philly, and then I'd be able to buy them. And for that whole week, I'd be able to listen to music that was playing in New York. So for me, I was like on the cutting edge. And I just fell in love with the music. There was a song by Public Enemy, and I don't remember what the song was, but Chuck D talked about Malcolm X. And then I started to ask around, like, who's Malcolm X? Like, I kind of like what he's saying. You know, who was he and why did he hate white people? Because that was my understanding of who Malcolm X was. And as I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, which I'm sure everybody here has read, I learned that there were like 7 or 8 books that he had read while he was incarcerated. And at that point in time, I had moved to New York to be closer to hip hop. And I was able to go to the Schomburg Center and find some of the books that he had read while he was imprisoned. And I was able to read those books. And then that took me down this rabbit hole of getting a master's degree in African American studies and really getting to learn about the struggle. And the more I learned about the struggle, the more I realized the way out of the struggle is through entrepreneurship. So if you can own your own shit and you can feed yourself and your family, you control your own destiny. And that's what put me on the path that I'm on to help artists create their own destinies.
That's awesome. And probably one final question. I've done my research on you. Like I said, I've been following for years. By the way, speaking of research, this is really sidebar. How's your Spanish studying going?
It's not so good. I started gung ho, during COVID because I actually had some free time. And then I got really busy working on all different kinds of stuff for my company. Like I found that I had time to really focus on the incubator. So I started the business plan and I started looking for money. So I didn't devote the time to it that I really needed to. And I'm disappointed in myself because it was the perfect time for me to really be able to learn the language.
Well, I asked because I got you a gift. I'm going to email it over as soon as we're done, but I got you 90 lessons from Pimsleur, audio lessons for Spanish. So you can listen in the car.
I love you.
So it's like 45 hours. And it's
I'm going to speak Spanish. I'm going to speak Spanish. I can't wait. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was so incredibly thoughtful.
So last question. And you can elaborate on the story because I don't know if they know the story if you want to, but I want to know, relax, Eli, last my question. Did you keep any of the letters from Pac from prison?
I did. I kept everything. I'm a bit of a hoarder, probably in a relatively good way, but yes, I kept everything. The downside is when I moved from Raleigh, North Carolina to Memphis, I had them all in a file folder and I hired a company to help me pack, and all of the letters seemed to be missing. And I didn't notice it for about 2 or 3 years, which is really disappointing. So I can't seem to find them. I assume that one of the packers took them, but I'm hesitant to say that because they might still be in a box. I have so many boxes that I kind of move with me over the years. I may find them one day. I hope that I do.
You need to set up a Google alert for handwritten Tupac letters from prison eBay. Because I'm sure they're worth some money.
I would guess that they're probably long gone by now. But the great thing is a lot of them I photocopied when I received them because I write to a lot of guys that are incarcerated. And I've sent those letters to different friends of mine over the years. So somewhere, somehow, I can probably piece them all together if I ever have to, like if I have to string it together. It's never become a priority for me. But I know that I sent the letters to C Murder. There was a guy that I was very close to in North Carolina. I sent them to him when he was incarcerated. I'm sure he kept them because he kind of keeps everything. So I'm hoping that if I ever do decide to write a book about my life, I'm hoping that I can find them.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
It would be really awesome if they were just like in my basement.
Sure.
And I'm hopeful.
I'm agreeing with you that they are. We'll put that energy out there. So growing up or being in the Philly area, you went to New York, but you were in the era of Rough House Records and Schoolie D,
yes,
Steady B.
Yes.
Philadelphia had a great hip hop scene.
It did. Looking at my Gucci, it's about that time. Philly had an amazing, amazing, amazing small industry at the time. I went to New York for a weekend in 1986 or 87, and I heard the Mr. Magic Marley Marl radio show, and I came home and quit my job and moved there a week and a half later. Just loaded all my shit into a U-Haul. I think I had like $200 to my name, which back then wasn't bad money, but still, I didn't have a job or anything. And I just showed up and started living in a sublet and thought I'll figure it out somehow. And I lived in New York until, actually it was before 87, because in 87 I moved to Montreal for 2 years or 3 years. And it was when I came home from Montreal that I started Rap Coalition. But I stayed a fan. I mean, I'm still a fan, but I stayed a fan before I started working in music for 12 years.
So many incredible stories.
I've had a really amazing life.
Yes, absolutely. I love hearing these stories. So let's get back to the business of it before these guys and gals kill me.
Absolutely. And let me also say, Scott, like if I had this to do all over again, I wouldn't change shit. Like I would still, all the times that I bang my head, I would still bang my head. I've really loved the experience, and I've really loved what I've been through, bad and good.
Well, that's a great life lesson right there. You know, do what you're passionate about, do what you love.
Yes.
And trust that all things are working for your good. You know, I've been through a lot of bad things, but I look back and I wouldn't have the life I have, the wife I have, the kids I have, had I not gone through those experiences.
That's real.
So you mentioned it takes money, and we talked about that a little bit, but that, you know, at the Revolt conference, coach from Quality Control said it takes about $250,000 to break an artist. There were two other guys who came up and said you can probably get, you know, Billboard top 40 for 125,000. So they kind of pushed back on that. But either way, 125, 250.
I wish he had said name them, but keep going.
500,000. That, when you're talking to young artists who are trying to get into this and it's their life, that's a hard thing to tell them. That's a hard conversation to have. So what?
But Scott, let me ask you this: like, if an artist came to you and said they wanted to start a restaurant, would you ever advise them to start a restaurant with no money?
Man, that's so good.
I don't know where we got the idea that the music industry is free, and that's part of my complaint about the business, because that's why artists get jerked. Somewhere there's a memo out there in the world that says you get discovered or put on in the music industry, and you don't. You really got to put yourself on. And just from doing what I do, I mean, I'm 28 years in, and I've noticed that it's easier, much easier, to find an investor than it is to get signed to a record label. So I don't understand why artists aren't coached from day one that in order to start a business, they need to find an investor, just like you would if you were starting a retail store or starting a restaurant.
So let's dig into that. That's a great kind of segue into this. So I've got a young guy that comes to me. I believe in him 100%. I know hip hop. He's talented. He's got the it factor, but we just lack the funds. So now we got to get an investor. So I develop a business plan. And then kind of, where do you recommend we start? Is it building a local fan base? Is it?
Yes. Well, you want to do two things at once. The first thing you want to do is certainly build a fan base, taking whatever monies you do have and building just in a small area so that you can't conquer the whole US, but if you can sort of conquer your city, just go to all the open mics, you know, do as much as you possibly can. But at the same time, you want to tell everybody that you know that you're looking for an investor, because you really just don't know where it's going to come from. You know, when I was working with Joyner Lucas, he found his investor when he was doing a show at a strip club. It was just a guy at the bar, and he happened to sit down at the bar and have a conversation with this guy before he got on stage. The guy didn't even really know he was a rapper. He didn't know much about him. Joyner got on stage, he performed, he came back to the bar, and Sean, his investor, was like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize you were a rapper." And they had a conversation, and you know, Sean was a little bit tipsy, and he said to Joyner, you know, "Give me your number. I'm going to call you later on in this week so we can talk, because I think it would be really cool." He's like, "I'm in real estate, but I think it would be really cool to start a record label." And Joyner gave him his number. He didn't hear from him for a couple weeks, so he just thought, oh, that was some bullshit. And then next thing he knew, his phone was ringing, and it was Sean saying, "Hey, I've got the capital. Can we have a meeting?" You know, I've worked with artists. One of the artists that I worked with out of New Orleans was backed by a guy who was a retired VP of security at UPS. Another artist that I worked with here in Atlanta had 4 investors that came together. One was a financial planner, one was a heart surgeon, one was an insurance salesperson, and I forget what the 4th guy was, but they came together to fund his record label. One of the guys that I'm working with currently, his investor is an electrician who's in the union in Newark, New Jersey. He's working on building out the electrical components at Newark Airport, but he's just an electrician that's in the union and makes great money. And he has chosen to invest in an artist out of Jacksonville, Florida. So there's guys that are like legitimate members of society that want to start record labels. There's also the guys that sell weed that want to be in the music industry. That absolutely exists. And then for people that don't feel that they can get an investor, they can always sign to a small independent label, but the chances of success, it's sort of like hitting the lottery or getting struck by lightning. You know, it's a little bit of a risk when you sign to somebody that says, "Hey, I'm a record label," but they don't have any success. Every now and again, you're the Migos and you sign to Quality Control, and it actually blows up. You know, Juvenile took a chance with Cash Money. It blew up. You know, you never know. But there's more failures than there are successes. And that's why I'm so big on finding an investor, because if you're in control of it yourself, at least you're creating your own destiny. You're not putting your life in somebody else's hands.
Is there any type of formula? So I guess I'm thinking from a business perspective. I know most businesses, if you want to sell them, there's like a 4-to-1 formula. If I build an Amazon store right now that's doing $100,000 a year, and I can show that on paper, I can go right now and sell it for $400,000 to get cash up front.
The music industry isn't the same. It's a very high risk industry. It's because it's built on emotion. You're not selling because you make the best widget. You're selling because somebody emotionally attaches to you, or they feel some sort of a connection to you, so they listen to your music. It's more of an emotional sell, and it's right up there in risk with like starting a restaurant.
Sure. So you've got this, I don't know if it's a 6-hour or a 10-hour rule for building your
6-hour driving radius.
Okay. You want to break that down for everybody?
I do. What I do in order to succeed is I build a circle around wherever the artist is based. And forgive me that it's getting a little bit dark. They just left food at my front door and I want to get it before a little raccoon grabs it. But what I do is I build depending on the budgets, anywhere from like a 6-hour driving radius to an 8-hour driving radius around wherever the artist is based. And then that becomes the target market. That's the area where we work, and we hit every place where a potential fan of the music might be hanging out. So we're doing it physically, and then we're also doing it digitally. We're working online, and we treat the internet just like it's another market. So we'll do influencer advertising, we'll do Google ads, Facebook ads. We'll build a merch site. We'll build an email list for a newsletter. We sort of come at this from many different angles, but working this in person is extremely important. Just like campaigning for president or campaigning for Senate or some sort of a political office, you really want to reach people, shake hands, kiss babies, take pictures with Batgirls, put them on Instagram, really build a movement for who you are as an artist, because the fans will vote for you by streaming your music and buying your merch and coming to your shows.
Interesting. So that, you're the one who schooled me in that and gave me that new perspective. I think there's some exceptions to the rule, and maybe I'm wrong, but before you hit me to that, I was looking at, if you look at Lil Peep, one of his first tours was Russia and Europe. Tekashi 6ix9ine, he was selling out tours overseas long before he got the buy-in from the American audience. I discovered Black Bear doing a live concert in Brazil, and every Brazilian knew all the words in English, and I'm like, I'm an American, I don't even know who this artist is, but he was able to sell out 1,000 club overseas. So I was always focused on, man, let the run the ads, let the data tell us where the fans are.
And who the fans are.
Yeah.
Like I test songs before I work a song. I'll test like 4 or 5 songs with Google ads and Facebook ads and see which ones convert the best. And then it's not like I just pick one and I don't work anything else. I work all 5, but the lion's share of the budget is going to go to the one that reacts the best.
Sure. Okay.
And I love research. I came up in an era where it was all gut. Like,
yes,
with Master P, we didn't get to test the music. We just put it out and we hope to God that people liked it.
Yeah.
Now I can test it. It's so much easier.
How many times have we heard the story that almost wasn't the single? The artist didn't want that one, and they pushed it, and it was all gut, right? It was people with experience.
All gut.
And but now you're right. We can equally just test different covers, different ads, different songs, and then let the data tell us where we should really.
Let the data tell me. Yep. Absolutely. And I always check the data. Like, I'm such a data nerd. Like, I really should become a data scientist. It would make my life easier. But I go into the dashboards on everything from YouTube to SoundCloud to Spotify to Amazon Music to Apple Music. Like, I really know, and then of course all the social media, I really know which platform, what the audience is for all of my clients. Like, that's so important.
Absolutely.
And they're different. Like, the SoundCloud audience is different than the Spotify or the Apple audience.
Yeah, and I try to encourage everybody to test, because it's not money wasted.
It's not.
You figure out what's not working and who's not your fan, and you never have to waste that money again. It's a great investment.
Yes. And that's why somebody like me will come along and only spend $150,000 when somebody like Carl Crawford will put $1 million into Megan Thee Stallion, because he's working it differently and not as targeted or data driven as somebody like me would.
And there's 2 polars to this, right? Because you really do need 6 figures, a big 6 figures to break an artist. But how many artists get signed, 6 figures invested in them, and then dropped? We never hear from them again. So I don't want the people to get the idea either that 6 figures is the solution.
It's not. Getting signed to a label is the start of the work. Everything you do up to that point is the foreplay, if you will. When I was working with Trouble here in Atlanta from Duct Tape, we spent $322,000 marketing him. Of that $322,000, 155 of that was new money. So what I mean by that is we spent 155, but as the money came back into the company, we then took that money and flipped it and put it back into the project, right? But we ended up spending $355,000. He eventually got signed at that point. The reason we stopped at 355, he got signed to Interscope. And at Interscope, my job was done. So I went on and started working another client. He brought on a new team of people. Interscope couldn't effectively work with his new team, and he got shelved at some point. And he went from making $20,000 a month independently as his share to getting a lump sum from Interscope, but he was more popular when he was independent, even though we were only working him in a 7-state area. When he got to Interscope, he never got to that next level. And it wasn't because the money wasn't there. They had infinitely more money than we had. It's that he didn't have the same team, and Interscope didn't share the same vision that he had for himself. So there was a disconnect, and they began to argue and fight over what they thought should be done. And at the end of the day, when you sign to a label, they kind of have control. They kind of win. You can either do it their way, or they can shelve you and move on to somebody else. And that's what they did. He's on Def Jam now, I think. But I know that there was a lot of frustration that first 9 months when he was at Interscope, because it just wasn't working. It wasn't meshing.
Okay, last question on God, and I'll turn it over to you guys.
You know he's lying, right?
Probably. I'm long-winded. If somebody comes, and I'm just looking for basic ballpark, do you have a kind of formula as far as percentages? If we brought 500,000 to you, what percentage is going to marketing? What percentage is going to?
It's different for every artist. The amount of money you'd spend on a pop rapper is a lot higher than the amount of money you'd spend like on a street rapper, like trap rap, because a pop rapper has to have radio in order to win today. So you're already looking at spending 150,000 on marketing and promotion. But if you add radio into the foray, you're going to end up spending probably another 100,000 on top of that. So I can't really give you a breakdown because every artist is different.
Okay, I got to turn it over to somebody, but see that
some guys are more digital, some guys are more street. It just really depends. Like the way that I would work NBA YoungBoy is very different than the way I'd work Trippie Redd.
Makes sense.
Very different.
But with payola supposedly not being a thing, but everybody keeps telling me you can't get radio play unless you got a bag.
I'm at radio right now with an artist.
Huh?
I'm at radio right now with an artist. I mean, it does. You do have to pay. You do have to pay to get your music played. And yes, payola is very illegal, but it's done.
Dang. Okay. Who's got a question? How important are relationships? Why look for hands?
Oh my God. Relationships are everything.
I preach that to them guys, to network with each other, to network lateral, to network up, to network down, because you never know. I hear these great stories from Charlie Jabley about when Rich the Kid was sleeping on a couch in the studio. You know, he didn't pay attention to him, and all these different things. So you never know. You know, work on those relationships.
It's true. I remember taking a class in New York before I got into the music industry, and one of my classmates was Puffy.
There you go.
And I had no clue.
That's awesome. Kay, Cartel, you first, guy.